What's up? Welcome back to another episode of Import Modify. On this episode, we'll be fabricating the downpipe to the turbo, figuring out the coolant system, getting the hoses that we need to make it all fit and work, working on that intercooler piping, getting that all sorted out, and just knock out as much as we can. Good content coming your way. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so I hope y'all enjoyed that montage of us putting that downpipe together. I gotta give a good shout out to Heath Grice. He's the owner of Bomb City Customs here in Amarillo. The guy is an excellent welder. That's why I called him in to help me do this. Yeah, I could have did it and made it stick, but my welds would have not been as pretty as his. The guy is truly a professional. That's why I call him up to do, my tedious stuff. And he's a good buddy of mine, and he don't mind helping me out. So shout out to Heath. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on here to getting the radiator mounted up right here. I need to make a little mount from here to up on the rail right there. I got some flat stock right there, so it'll be quick and easy to do that. That way I can have the radiator in place so I can start working with the intercooler piping and whatnot. And then after we get all that figured out, we'll actually get to figuring out the hoses and all that for the radiator itself. Then after that, it's going to be pretty simple from there on. Just, buttoning everything up, getting the parameters loaded in the Apex unit, and then we'll be starting it for the first time, finally. So it wasn't bad at all. It was just a piece of flat stock I cut to the proper length. I drilled holes out in both ends of it so that I can use the bolts to go through and mount it. And looking at the upper crossbar right here, I have an opening, which is perfect for me because I was able to just put a nut and lock washer on that side to secure it up to the upper rail. So this part's good to go. Now I know exactly where I need to route the pipe to. So I'm going to go ahead and mount the bumper up onto the chassis so that I can get a better idea of how I'm going to do all this. So I'm just going to wing it like I always do, and hopefully the end results will be what we expect. Alright, so I was playing around with the intercooler piping with the little bit of piping that I do have. Now I thought I had enough to do this, but I don't have enough to get all the angles that I need. So I ended up having to order me another intercooler piping kit, and I'm at the mercy now of the FedEx guy to bring it in this weekend. It's in Dallas right now, so I'm gonna cross my fingers in hopes that I do get that intercooler piping in time. And if you notice right here, I have this 3-inch coupler to 2.5-inch coupler, and it is interfering with this motor mount right there. So I'm gonna have to trim that boot back, and hopefully I can get the proper clearance I need in order to run the piping to the mass airflow sensor. And just getting a general idea of the routing right now. Now don't pay attention to this boot right here. I was just kind of playing around to see which would be the best way to go about it, and I think it's just going to be getting the proper intercooler piping to go straight from the turbo to this side right here, and then come out there, route back through here up to the throttle body, and that would be the best bet. And also I still have to play around with piping once I get it in to see if I need to take this bracket out here for the mass airflow sensor and figure out what I'm going to do to mount the mass airflow sensor. So a little bit of snags you run into whenever you're doing builds like this, but no problem. And also I went ahead and got some more parts in, and I got me a catch can. Now this catch can is pretty cheap catch can. I got it on eBay for like 30 bucks, and it is actually pretty impressive, the quality of the catch can, because it does have the little bronze micron filter in it, and it has a baffle in it like your expensive name brand ones, and it's got 2 inlets and 1 outlet, which is what I need for this setup. And it also comes with a little valve right here on the bottom for draining it. So 30 bucks, well spent. It should work fine for what I got. And finding the proper O2 sensor for this car, I gotta tell you, I was racking my brain on it because I have this connector here. Now this engine's out of an 84, and so was the turbo and everything, and the O2 sensor, and there's different type of O2 sensors they use on the 84. And the one that I was needing is a Titana, and that's the skinnier one. Now I welded on regular bungs to the downpipe, but you have to run an adapter to make it all work. So 18 by 1.5 thread pitch is a regular thread pitch of a regular size bung. So you got to go from 18 by 1.5 to 12 by 1.25, and that's what this reducer does. And that will allow me to get that working. And I have to figure out something with this connector here because it's different from that on the harness, and I could not find a Titana with that connector, and that was throwing me off about what O2 sensor I need to find and use. And thankfully the guys at the Z31 group, Facebook group, pointed me in the right direction. I did match the ECU part number to find out the proper O2 sensor I need, and in fact I did need the Titana. So thank you guys on that Facebook group for helping me out with that. And I also got this adapter right here, this intercooler piping with the proper adapter for my Turbo XS blow-off valve. So we're good on that. Hopefully I get that piping in pretty soon. We'll go ahead and install the distributor, O2 sensor, figure out the wiring, and then I guess play with the catch can. All right, guys, so I got some good news. I was digging around in the wiring harness, looking at schematics and whatnot, trying to figure out what to do about this connector. Then I started going back to the chassis and look, only to find out that the plug-in that they had plugged into the O2 sensor that was on the 84, I had taped it off and marked O2 on it because this was connected to the O2 sensor. Now, I saw this connector hanging in the back, and I started looking at the coloring of the wire. And the coloring of this wire and this connector matches exactly what I need for the O2 sensor. So they obviously had the wrong connector plugged into the O2 sensor, so that saves me a lot of time. I'll just be able to install that O2 sensor and plug it into the connector that originally goes to it. So that's why I was racking my brain up earlier about what type of sensor goes in this car, and I'm glad that I figured it out and saved me a lot of time and headache in the future. So cool, I'm gonna go ahead and mount that O2 sensor in, and I'll plug it in, and then we'll move on from there. So now it's time to move on to the wideband. I got me an AEM wideband, and we need this desperately to monitor the air-fuel ratios because we changed things like the turbo and the injectors, and to be able to do that, you need this. It's vital to getting the tune of the engine correct. So we're going to go ahead and mount the O2 sensor up to the extra bung that I had welded on, and then we're going to get a little creative as far as routing the wiring and get this thing mounted up in the cabin. Okay, so I got both of the O2 sensors installed in the downpipe now, and I got the harness right here zip tied up out of the way of the exhaust. I got it up right here. I haven't secured it yet, but there was a hole down in this area right here on the bulkhead where I passed the wideband O2 wiring through the bulkhead, and now it is in the cabin area. So right there. So I got to go ahead now and mount the bracket for the gauge itself and tuck the wiring up, and then from there we can move on. Alright guys, so we got the wideband gauge installed, got the gauge itself installed, and I sourced out this bracket here when I was at the pull apart place. They had one just on a Z31 just hanging out there, so I picked it up and thought I can use it to mount my wideband, and just so happens it was perfect. So I don't have another pod. I was gonna mount it up here, but it's not bad. It's good right there. I'm happy with it right there. And now that we got the wideband all good to go, we are going to move on. I'm gonna prep that bracket, paint it, and mount the cable securely, and then we'll move on from there. Well, I got the intercooler piping in, guys. Good deal. So now we can move on to getting this intercooler piping all figured out, but I did get some more stuff on the front end of the engine done. And basically, while I was at it, I removed the mass airflow bracket from the side fender well area, and then I painted over the spot welds just to ensure they don't rust. So we're good to go on intercooler piping, getting that all figured out. But I did get the radiator fan and water pump pulley on. And when I did that, I noticed that the belt that goes around the alternator actually has to go around the water pump as well. So I had to go back to the parts house and get me a belt that would fit, and that is actually the factory belt. So it worked just fine with the 90 amp upgraded alternator, so we're good to go on that. I had to loosen up this belt here in order to work with the downpipe right there for the coolant, which I installed with the new hose. So I have the hoses for the bottom figured out. I have the factory bottom radiator hose, and I grabbed this one while I was over there because it has a bigger outlet right there. and I need that in order to make it fit on the bottom radiator because the outlet's bigger. So I need to get me a coolant coupler that I can cut the hoses, put the coupler in between, clamp it down, make that work. Upper radiator hose will be in tomorrow, so I'm a little bit set back on that for the time being. So we're gonna move on now to the intercooler piping, get that all figured out, and see how it looks in the end. Okay, so the case of all intercooler piping, whenever you're doing a universal kit, you're not going to have the proper length of pipes, so you're going to have to end up cutting pipes. And when you do that, you lose the beveled edge on one side of the intercooler pipe. And I made a pretty cool tool that allows me to bevel the edges. And basically I got a pair of vice grips right here. And since this is a 2.5 inch pipe, I have a 2.5 inch exhaust clamp on one end and a big washer on the other. I welded it to the clamp on the vice grips, and basically the way it works is you have your intercooler piping after you cut it, and you just basically insert that like that, clamp it down, release it, and now you got a nice beveled edge on the end. So little tip from me to you: make this tool if you're going to do turbo applications. It's going to save you a lot of time and headache, and it's very cheap. You can go to any parts house, grab you a 2.5 inch exhaust clamp, and then find you a big enough washer, weld them on, and there you go. Alright guys, so we got a lot done on this episode. We got the downpipe fabricated and installed. We got the oxygen sensor figured out with the appropriate connector. We got the wideband installed as well with the gauge up in the cabin area. And we got most of the intercooler piping done, and I say most of it because we're missing a couple pieces, and you can't foresee these things because you don't know what you're up against until you actually do it. And I need a 2.5 to 2.75 coupler right here with the appropriate clamps to make that connection. And I need another 2.5 clamp right there because I actually ran out. And as you can see, I left this area open right here for working with the mass airflow sensor. So I'm going to go ahead and get a game plan on that so we can knock that out. I do need a 2-inch clamp right there for this coupler here. And I do have a game plan on the radiator hoses to get all that to work with the custom radiator. So we'll get all those things done on the next episode along with the apex unit and everything. And then from there, we will be able to start that thing. And I'm getting so close to it, I could just hear it run. But it's just a process. And so now I have to order parts, wait about a week for them to come in to get back on it. But with that being said, next episode, we're going to go ahead and focus on my 2018 4-cylinder turbo Camaro. I did get some parts in for that and enough to shoot an episode. We have Megan Easy Street coilovers, Mishimoto intake, and a Mishimoto dual catch can setup. We're going to go ahead and install all that. And I'll show you guys a little bit about the car because a lot of people are like, Camaros, 4-cylinder, it's not a V8. I'm telling you, if that car wasn't called a Camaro and it was called something else, a lot of people would praise it because it's pretty impressive for a 4-cylinder turbo. It makes like 275 horsepower, bone stock, and it's pretty easy to get up to like 350, 400 horsepower range. I've been doing a lot of research on it, so if you guys are new to watching me on this, go ahead and subscribe, and you'll be able to follow that as stages go on. But first go parts. That's what we got to throw on the Camaro, and then after that episode, I should have all the parts I need to finish off the Z31. We'll get back to that. And then after that's done, we'll be focusing on my E46 M3 because I am super stoked on this thing as well. and I'm super stoked on a lot of my projects I got. So I am motivated, ready to go, ready to get these things knocked out. So hopefully things go smooth enough to where I can, you know, just knock them out and get them going, man. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode, guys. I want to give a quick thanks real quick to all you new subscribers. I know a lot of you guys have subscribed for the E46 M3, but just go ahead and enjoy the rest of the stuff that I have going on in the shop until we get to that point. You know, a lot of cool content, and what you see in this episode is what to expect in the future. So like, comment, subscribe, and share. I'll see you guys on the next episode.